Only high society guests are invited, Colette. We don't want to have to explain your situation. That was the text message I received from my own mother 3 weeks before her 35th anniversary. For 10 years, I was the daughter they cropped out of photos, the one who worked with hammers while my sister married into Goldman Sachs. They wanted me invisible. They wanted me gone. What they didn't realize was that the high society venue they'd booked for their party, I didn't just belong there. I owned the very air they were breathing. If you've ever been treated like an embarrassment by the people who were supposed to love you, if you've ever been told you weren't enough while you were secretly building an empire, this story is for you. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and let's talk about why you should never, ever underestimate the person standing in the shadows. The erasure, the setup. My name is Colette Owens. I'm 32 years old, and for the last decade, I've been a ghost in my own family. I grew up just outside Boston in a house that smelled of expensive floor wax and unearned pride. My parents, Richard and Diane, were the kind of people who didn't just live life, they curated it. Everything was a performance. My older sister, Vivian, was the lead actress. She was the pretty one, the social one. When she married Bradley Hartley from Goldman Sachs and moved into a 6-bedroom colonial in Wellesley, my parents acted like she'd ascended to the throne. And then there was me. I chose architecture. Not the flashy, glass skyscraper kind that my father could brag about at the club, but historic preservation. I'm the person who crawls through 200-year-old attics, fighting to save the soul of a building before developers can turn it into a parking lot. To my mother, I did something with old houses. To my father, I was a failure. One Thanksgiving, he looked me dead in the eye and said, "When you have a real career, we'll talk about putting you back on the Christmas card." He wasn't joking. I found out later that my mother had actually cropped me out of the photos she posted on Facebook. Her excuse: "The composition looked better, dear." I was a smudge on their perfect canvas. The secret project, the conflict escalation. 3 years ago, I stopped trying to convince them. I stopped explaining. I just went to work. I received a call that changed my life. The Whitmore estate, a 150-year-old landmark mansion, was slated for demolition. The Historical Society had given up, but the National Trust for Historic Preservation wasn't ready to let it go. They needed someone who understood that buildings aren't just wood and stone, they're stories. I spent 18 months living and breathing that house. I hand-selected every timber. I tracked down artisans who still knew how to restore Victorian plaster. I spent 3 entire months on the front doors alone, 2 massive panels of quarter-sawn oak that had been rotting for a century. I sanded them until my fingers bled, bringing the grain back to life. I worked under my firm's name. I didn't need the Owens name to get ahead. In fact, the Owens name was the last thing I wanted associated with my masterpiece. The text message, the breaking point. Then came the text. I was in my small apartment in Cambridge when my phone buzzed. I'd been removed from the family group chat 2 years ago, but suddenly, I was added back. Just for one message. "Colette, don't come to the anniversary party. Only high society guests will be there. We don't want to explain your situation. Mom and Dad, your situation, like I was a recovering addict or a criminal. Not a woman who had just been nominated for the AIA Gold Medal, architecture's highest honor. The same award given to Frank Lloyd Wright." I sat in the dark for a long time. I looked at that text. Then I looked at the letter on my desk from Margaret Caldwell, the executive director of the National Trust. Margaret was my mentor. She was the one who believed in me when my own father called my career a hobby. And then, the irony hit me like a physical blow. My parents had invited Margaret Caldwell to their party. They wanted her on their charity board. They wanted to impress the high society of the National Trust inside the very building I had saved. The night of the party, sensory detail. The night of the party, I didn't stay home. I drove 45 minutes through the winding Massachusetts backroads. I watched the Whitmore estate appear through the trees, lit up like a palace. It was beautiful. My doors were propped open. My chandeliers were throwing light across the marble. Inside, 150 guests in black tie attire were sipping $300 bottles of Krug champagne. My mother was wearing a burgundy Valentino gown, draped in diamonds, holding court. "The venue is spectacular, Diane," a guest said. "Who did the renovation?" My mother waved a hand dismissively. "Oh, some firm or another. The coordinator handled it. But isn't the taste just impeccable? She was standing on my hard work, using my sweat and my vision to buy social capital, all while telling people I was too mentally unwell to be there. The truth emerges. The clock struck 7:30 p.m. That was the exact moment the American Institute of Architects took their announcement live. Across the room, phones began to buzz. A local journalist, a friend of a friend, gasped. "Did you see this? The architect who restored this building just won the Gold Medal nomination. Her name is Colette Owens." The name rippled through the room. Owens, like the hosts. My mother's face went from a mask of surgical perfection to a smear of panic. "Oh, must be a different Owens," she laughed, her voice hitting a shrill, desperate note. "Our Colette, she works in construction. Hammers and things." But then, Margaret Caldwell stepped into the center of the room. Margaret doesn't scream. She doesn't have to. She has the kind of presence that turns a room into a vacuum. She looked at my mother, then at my father, and then she turned to the crowd. "I'd like to say a few words about this estate," Margaret said, "and about the woman who saved it." Margaret didn't hold back. She told them everything. She told them about the 18-month restoration. She told them about the woman who fought for every inch of the foyer they were standing in. And then, she looked directly at my mother. "I'm surprised Colette isn't here," Margaret said, her voice like ice. "Diane told me she was not well." Which is strange, because Colette is currently leading the $500,000 restoration of the governor's mansion. The silence wasn't just quiet, it was heavy. 150 pairs of eyes turned toward my parents. That's when I walked through the front doors. I wasn't wearing a second-hand dress. I was wearing midnight blue silk and a Cartier watch I'd bought with my own commission. I didn't yell. I didn't make a scene. I just walked up to my mother, whose glass was trembling so hard the champagne was sloshing over the rim. "I'm feeling much better, Mom," I said. My sister, Vivian, tried to intervene. "You always have to make it about yourself, don't you? This is their night." I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized I wasn't afraid of her anymore. "I didn't make the news, Vivian. I just did the work. You're the one who told everyone I was a family embarrassment. I think the only embarrassment in this room is the fact that you're throwing a party in a building you don't even understand." The payoff was immediate. Judge Harrison, a man my father had been sucking up to for months, set his glass down. "Richard," he said, "I think we should reconsider that golf trip. I prefer to associate with people who have their priorities in order." My mother's high society friends began to whisper. The pity they had felt for her troubled daughter vanished, replaced by a cold, sharp judgment. They saw the lie. They saw the cruelty. And for people like my parents, being seen as cruel is a fate worse than death. I left that night before the cake was even cut. As I walked out those oak doors, the ones I'd sanded with my own hands, I realized something. You can't restore a relationship if the foundation is built on lies. But you can restore yourself. My parents wanted me to be a smudge on their canvas. Instead, I built the gallery. If this story gave you the chills, smash that like button. It helps us bring more of these stories to light. Tell me in the comments, have you ever had a Colette moment where your success spoke louder than their insults? I read every single one. And if you're new here, subscribe and hit that bell. You don't want to miss what we have coming next. Until next time, keep building.